I have no intention of watching the Game Awards, and this batch of nominees is exactly why. Like, what am I even looking at? Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Get out of here. Basically, every single one of these games made its way onto my worst of the year list. So, seeing Jeff Keighley's Shill Show unironically try to promote them as like the industry defining titles of the year is laughable to me. I have a really big issue with how these shows are conducted, how they're run, and what they try to push forward. To me, looking at this list, I was immediately just like, oh yeah, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and Mario and Luigi Brothership are both way better than all of this. And the more I think about it, I think that extends to quite a few other Nintendo games that came out this year. We'll be talking about that as I go through my top 10 games of the year list next month. But looking at like these nominations, looking at what they're trying to push onto people, looking at what they're trying to do, like I do think it needs to be understood, and I do need to say this every year because I really don't want to make the same mistake I did the past couple of years, ever since 2020. These award shows are absolutely rigged. A Nintendo game that sold 1.5 million units would never be nominated for Game of the Year, right? Look at Kirby and the Forgotten Land, right? You know, a 3D platformer that was far more successful than Astrobot, uh, was considered the best Kirby game ever produced. That game was a huge deal for a lot of people, right? Forgotten Land was an absolute gem. But then you look at Astrobot, which has been like a fraction of successful, and suddenly, like, not only does it get more hype from the gaming journal community, but it also gets nominated for awards that Forgotten Land never achieved. And that's true in general. When you look at these like nominations, you can see plenty of Nintendo Switch games that were better than this, not only this year or last year, but like all throughout the lifespan. Like plenty of great Nintendo Switch games were never nominated for Game of the Year. And with that being said, it couldn't be more obvious that these award shows are completely bought and paid for by China, by Sony, by whoever else is like shilling out the cash for it. And I do think this is a major reason why we're seeing less and less of a Nintendo presence at these award shows. Because in recent years, Nintendo was actually involved with sponsoring the show, and they had a bunch of Switch ads. They were coming out full force, and now, you know, after what happened in 2023, we've seen them disassociate with Jeff. We've seen like Jeff publicly state how annoyed he is that they're not meeting with him or doing anything with him. And now, you know, looking at 2024, seeing at just how no Nintendo game has gotten nominated at all, we can see what has happened is that Jeff is trying to strong arm the company into supporting his nonsense. Okay. And until they do, they're not going to get any positive coverage whatsoever. And so, what we're seeing now, we are seeing people begin to. We are beginning to see people like notice this and point this out. This has been true for years, but it got pretty bad in 2023 with the Mario movie being shafted in spite of being like far more successful and iconic than The Last of Us will ever be. We saw like Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder get shafted, and now we're seeing like we're at the point now where Nintendo games aren't being nominated at all. Like in order to push the illusion that these other games are far more popular and just higher quality, but the reality is somewhat different, right? Like I've said this before, but I don't think any of the games that are nominated for Game of the Year are in actually are in actuality in any way relevant or popular. Like when you look at something like Astrobot, you see something that can't compete with Nintendo 3D platformers. When you look at Black Myth Wukong or uh, Elden Ring, you see games that can't compete with Zelda. When you look at like, Final Fantasy VII R, you see like a declining RPG franchise that is falling way short of what Nintendo is doing. When you look at Metaphor ReFantasio, you see a juvenile JRPG targeted at woke audiences that that got a following for political reasons. Similar to games like Disco Elysium, Undertale, or Dragon Age Inquisition, right? Like when you look at these games, you see that Nintendo is doing better than all of them, and yet people don't. The game journalists are doing everything they possibly can to avoid talking about Nintendo, right? They are biased against the company. And this is one of those years where you can totally see that in full force. For the longest time, people were telling me that they're not biased. Like they gave Breath of the Wild a Game of the Year award. Yeah, they did it so idiots like you wouldn't think they're biased against Nintendo. Again, we consistently see these Sony exclusive nominated. We consistently see these woke titles nominated. We see shit that no one's ever heard of nominated. But don't you dare suggest that something like Mario and Luigi Brothership should be nominated. Don't you dare suggest that something like Echoes of Wisdom should be nominated, or Unicorn Overlord, or Princess Peach Showtime, or what have you. Like, don't you dare bring up the fact that there are games other than Mario and Zelda that could be nominated for Game of the Year. Like, for me, the Game Awards' lack of ability to discern between any kind of like quality product is a big reason why I do not and never have taken them seriously. I don't respect them. Watching the show like in last year and seeing how they disrespected like Eiji Aonuma, seeing how they worship Baldur's Gate 3. This is not a show that exists to celebrate gaming or developers. It's something that exists to prop up certain people in the industry. You know, it people like Hideo Kojima, people like Sean Murray, people like Neil Druckmann, people with no credibility at all. But they're at the Game Awards shows though. Like, yeah, never mind that they don't produce good content or they've never been relevant. Forget the forget the fact that there are far more talented people in general in this industry. Like, no, we gotta celebrate those three guys every single time. It's been like almost a decade now since Kojima has left Konami, and what has he done? What has he done besides Death Stranding? Which was a complete and total failure. Like, what has he done? And it's Jeff and the Shill Show that have been propping him up all this time. Like, Jeff, in a lot of ways, is Kojima's biggest enabler right now. And to me, that's something that really needs to be addressed and condemned about him, right? This isn't just about the Game of the Year awards being corrupt, right? This isn't just about the award show being corrupt. It's about how it tries to use its its credibility to prop up people and titles that nobody actually cares about. Okay, like I'm so tired of seeing titles like It Takes Two get get brought up on stage. I'm tired of seeing these stupid shows, these stupid musical numbers that nobody cares for. I'm sick of like good video games being shafted in favor of things that nobody will remember a year from now. Just look at Baldur's Gate 3. Just look at Alan Wake 2, Starfield, right? Spider-Man 2. You know, how all of those games have become completely irrelevant in the past year Meanwhile, like Mario Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom, in a lot of ways, are more relevant than ever, right? Like we've seen so many good things come out from Nintendo in the past year or so, and that didn't stop even after the Game Awards did everything in its power to cripple them last year. And it's going to be the same thing this year, I think. Jeff is not going to talk about anything Nintendo related. Um, he is going to do everything in his power to prop up things that nobody really cares about. You know, stuff like Black Myth Wukong and Metaphor ReFantasio. Like he's going to like go up there and give some award to something that is going to be completely forgotten like a year from now. You know, Black Myth or Metaphor, I would say. And it's all just going to completely collapse, right? Because these award shows aren't about the games. You know, nobody is actually tuning into these shows because they think they're going to have any merit or value. To me, like looking at these nominees, you know, I I am not going to watch the show. I don't care about the show. And more than that, I am going to openly disrespect you if you watch or care about the show at all. This is a show that should be actively boycotted by gamers, and we need to start actively condemning people who care about it.